BYU and Wyoming are renewing an old rivalry. In fact, the third longest series played in BYU football history. Why don't we get an inside look at the Wyoming Cowboys from Coduy Tucket, and we'll talk what to expect from the Pokes and the Cougs on Saturday night.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view or listen of the day, and appreciate all of you who like to call everydayers right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket via YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today with that offer. All right, please welcome in now Coduy Tucket from 7220 Sports. And Cody, I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about this rivalry because, as I mentioned, it's the third most played in BYU football history. The Cowboys and the Cougars got a long history against one another. How excited are you for these two to be getting back together inside War Memorial Stadium on Saturday?
Well, Jake, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. And this one's always fun. You know, I think a lot of Wyoming fans would still consider, even though Wyoming hasn't played BYU in a long time and definitely with no consistency, Colorado State's kind of 1A and 1B with BYU still to this day. And it doesn't matter that we haven't met. Doesn't matter that we haven't played. The venom is still very much alive over here.
Now, obviously, these are two fan bases that love to get after one another, so looking forward to that environment, obviously, up there in Laramie. But I also wanted to ask you, in terms of the transition from Craig Bohl over to Jay Sawvel, I'm not going to lie, I've been kind of a closet Wyoming fan because I just love Craig Bohl so much, and he had a really, really good run up there in Wyoming. Give me a sense just overall how the transition has gone as Jay Sawvel takes over for one of his mentors.
Well, record-wise, obviously not very well so far. But I tell you what, Jay Sawvel, in my opinion, won the offseason 100%. A big knock on Craig Bohl from a lot of people, mainly players, former players, was that he just wasn't a player's coach. And he was tough, and he was a CEO. And the kind of stuff he learned, in his upbringing in Nebraska, under Tom Osborne and Bob Devaney and guys like that. So he went with the CEO approach where he wasn't buddy and, it wasn't how's your mom doing and how's everybody back home kind of stuff from what I understand. And that doesn't make him a bad guy by any stretch. He's not. Everybody had a lot of respect for Craig. But Jay, on the flip side, during the offseason, you could tell he let the social media team in more. They were able to do way more stuff. Craig did not play that stuff at all, did not do cameras, did not do, I joke with him and say, man, when are you ever going to do one of those awesome tearjerker videos where some kid gets a scholarship? You've put more than 50 kids on scholarship that were walk-ons, and that's really cool. And that's another Nebraska trait he brought with him. And he said, that's hokey and it's fake. I'm not buying that either. But the other thing that he did, he does not let players wear the number 1. Jay Sawvel still isn't doing that, but Craig never let guys have names on the back of their jerseys, and that was always something he wanted to do, that guys wanted. Jay came in immediately and is letting them do that. And, of course, with an 0-2 start now, the fans are like, oh, no, you're too worried about names on the back of jerseys instead of winning games, which, of course, is hogwash. But Jay's putting out videos of him putting up 350 in the weight room with his guys, and he is a guy who asks how your mom's doing and tells you, when I went on your recruiting visit, that was the best spaghetti I ever had in my life. Stuff like that I really feel is meaningful to players, especially in today's age. And, let's face it, Jake, Wyoming's not rolling around in NIL cash. So you need to make it harder to leave a place like Wyoming because of the relationship you have with your coach and the relationship you have with the fan base. And I think it's going to be a lot harder. And Wyoming hasn't been hit by the portal very hard the last 2 years, but I tell you, the first year it opened, they lost about 12 starters right off the bat. And every one of those guys talked about their lack of a relationship with Craig Bohl. So I think he won the offseason. I really do. Of course, fans aren't happy right now, and they're not going to be happy. I know one thing that will make them happy, however, and will turn the frown upside down, and that's beating BYU. There couldn't be a better opponent to turn things around if they can do it.
Now, obviously, you referred to the rough start to the season, 0-2. I watched that game against Arizona State, and I was floored at just the way that Wyoming played in that game, because it was kind of just the antithesis of what I've seen from Wyoming over the last few years. But I had a chance to go back. I didn't watch the entirety of the Idaho game, but it showed I felt like a better fight from the team, even though they lost to the Vandals, and that's obviously an upset loss because they're an FCS program, speaking of Idaho. But give me a sense for just how things are as they get ready to host BYU on Saturday at 0-2.
Great question. I mean, the sky's falling around here if you go on social media for 5 minutes, and, there's reason to believe the sky's falling in some ways. But I tell you, in the locker room, the message is, hey, first of all, BYU's coming to town. That's a way to cure some ills real quick and make these first two games kind of forgettable and put them in the rear view even further. And they haven't played any Mountain West games yet, which, of course, you can still win your conference. Haven't gone into conference play yet. But, and that's nice thought. But after what we've seen these first two games, it's kind of hard to have a lot of belief that that's something that's going to happen. You talk about the Craig Bohl era and the transition over to Jay Sawvel. Something that has not transitioned is Wyoming was one of the most disciplined teams on planet Earth under Craig Bohl. They already have 16 penalties through 2 games, and they have been costly bonehead penalties, the kind that just make you rip your hair out. And also the defense, has been on its heels a little bit in these first, especially in Tempe. I mean, that game wasn't even competitive. The last week got better, but they went through a 10-minute lull where they let Idaho score a couple of times, and you just can't do that. And it's hard to believe you lose to an FCS team at home in front of a sellout crowd when you hold them to 1 for 13 on third down, but that's exactly what happened. So there's not a ton of reason for belief as far as that goes. And the offensive line has been shoddy. The running game, they're without Harrison Waylee, which is a killer. I mean, he's almost 1,000-yard back last year in 8 games. Missing him has not been fun. Missing all-conference tight end John Michael Gyllenborg has also taken away an easier outlet for Evan Svoboda. So it's been really brutal so far, Jake. It really has, and not a lot of reason for belief right now. But there were some positives, but and maybe it's the pessimistic glass half empty part of me, Jake, where you're like, yeah, but it was against an FCS team. And that's nothing against Idaho. Nothing. They played a really good game. They have a really good defense. I think they're going to do some damage down there, but you don't lose at home to an FCS school. You don't lose at home when you have a 7-game winning streak at home. You don't lose at home when it's sold out for the first time since 2011. You just don't do it.
All right. I want to talk more specifically about the BYU versus Wyoming matchup, just players to know, et cetera. We'll dig into that momentarily as you roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Factor Meals. Now, Factor Meals is here for you guys, for a lot of people who are on the go. Now, I obviously, during this time of year, I'm all over the place. I can assure you of that. For yesterday, for example, I went from my radio show to Utah Hockey Club practice to BYU football practice all in a day. And it was just an incredible day. But the best part about our friends over at Factor Meals, they can help you out because these meals are ready in 2 minutes. That's the best part about it. 2 minutes, and you got a fresh, hot and ready meal right there for you guys. With over 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from. Every week, you always have new flavors to explore so it doesn't get old. And the best part is you can make your day delicious. From breakfast to dessert, stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Once again, they're ready in 2 minutes in the microwave. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use the promo code LockedOnCollege50 and get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Once again, to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. And it's all courtesy of your friends over at Factor Meals. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel, we talk a lot about the sports betting options that are available to you guys because they are America's #1 sports book. Doing something a little bit different right now. Now through September 22nd, for those of you big NFL fans, all FanDuel customers can get $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. It's all available to you guys, and all you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and of course, you can cancel at any time. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app this week and use it for FanDuel's double your winnings for all of Sunday. September 15th. Pre-game money line bets. Profit boost will be live starting today, speaking of September 12th. So take advantage of it today. Go to your account page now to learn more about your boost that's available to you guys from our friends over at FanDuel. Get started today, FanDuel.com, to download America's #1 sportsbook. Take advantage of all these offers available to you now from our friends over at FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you've not done so already, check out our friends over the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin's got everything when it comes to the college football universe for you guys. It's available wherever you get your podcast. It's also available on YouTube. Get the inside scoop on all things college football with the Locked On College Football Podcast. Check it out. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, it is your team every day. All right, welcoming Coduy Tucket back in. And Coduy, big matchup on Saturday. The Cougars coming to War Memorial Stadium. Give me a sense for the feeling around this program as to the matchup about BYU. I guess what matchup are you most concerned about, and speaking from the Wyoming perspective?
Well, you got to start with the Cougars defense. I mean, they held SMU to 5 field goals in Dallas last week, and Wyoming's offense has given you little reason to believe that they can move the football. They weren't able to do it in Tempe. They weren't able to do it much against Idaho. But once again, Jake, just those bonehead penalties, man, that has really hampered this squad. They had one chance at Arizona State in that second quarter to really or in the second drive, I should say, of the game, to really right the ship after throwing a pick six. Started moving the ball, got the ball past midfield, boom, boom, 2 penalties in a row, and the next thing you know, it's another interception, and the Avalanche is on. So many opportunities to beat Idaho last week. They have the ball first and goal at the 1-yard line, false start. They end up kicking a 22-yard field goal. That can't happen, and that has really been a huge, huge issue so far. I want to say the Cowboys had 35 penalties all of last season. They're already at 16. Yeah. You can't do it, man. You can't have it. So the defense for BYU is definitely something that everybody has their mind on. You mentioned a little earlier that, Caden Barnett gave up 3 sacks. To his credit, spoke with him this week. He absolutely owned it. He knew that James Newby, the edge rusher for Idaho, he knew that Keyshawn had the snap count down. And on one play, even Jake, he blew around the edge and hammered Evan Svoboda. He was offside, but they didn't blow the whistle in time, and he absolutely dropped Evan on his wallet. And, so technically, not a 4th sack, but, the damage was done, insult to injury. And, yeah, man, I think BYU's defense is, around here, everybody jokes about BYU's age, of course, because they're a lot older than Wyoming, to say the least. It was amazing in 2022, before that game in Provo, you looked, and there were 6 guys that actually played against Wyoming in the 2016 Poinsettia So much older than Wyoming, much bigger, much stronger, much faster in some cases, and that is definitely a concern for Evan Svoboda, who, aside from Air Force's quarterback, which, as your listeners know, Air Force runs an option, he's the only one saving Evan from being at the bottom of the barrel in almost every single passing category in the country.
Now, speaking about Evan Svoboda, he's got a connection to Utah. He played at Snow College down in Ephraim before going to Wyoming. He is a big dude. Are they trying to essentially get back in the mold of getting the Josh Allens of the world back at Wyoming at quarterback? Because Svoboda is 6'5", 245, 250, it looks like.
Yeah, no, he's a huge human being. He's way bigger than Josh. And earlier this year in Bill's training camp, when the college football video game came out, he said, yeah, I'm playing with Wyoming, of course, and they have a quarterback who can throw it over the mountain. And Evan can do that. We just haven't seen it yet. He's got a huge arm. He's ripped. They call him Drago. He looks just like Drago, too. He wanted the number 17. He wanted to wear Josh's number. He makes no bones about it that he came to Wyoming a lot because he saw what happened with Josh's career trajectory starting in Laramie, and he's embraced that. But right now, you know how it goes, man. The trolls are out in full force after an 0-2 start, especially when it's an 0-2 start like this, and people are demanding he gets rid of number 17 and quits wearing that number. So that pretty much sums up how things have been around here for the last 2 weeks.
Now, you mentioned Harrison Waylee has not been available this season. He was an electric running back last year, a Northern Illinois transfer, if I recall correctly. And how much his not being available affected this offense?
You wouldn't think as much because Wyoming's ran a power game for so long under Craig Bohl, and that was going to continue under Jay Sawvel. But you can't deny it, man. He had a 65-yard touchdown run against Texas last year in Austin. He outraced their secondary with ease. I mean, so not many people can do that. So he's a really special back. They're really missing him. But to be honest with you, DJ Jones is a really nice back too, a transfer from North Carolina. The holes just haven't been there. And the few holes that have, when you watch from the press box, you think Harrison might have broke that. He might have got out of that arm tackle and been gone. And that's something that just DJ hasn't been able to do yet. So they do have a nice stable of running backs. Ashton Genty, of course, is the class of the Mountain West. But as far as an overall group goes, I would put Wyoming up against anybody else in this league. So with a healthy Harrison Waylee, and that just hasn't been the case yet. Obviously hurt his knee 2 weeks right before the season started and had to have a scope. So they're hoping to have him back by at least Air Force.
Now, the wide receivers and the just overall receivers, pretty balanced in terms of just the numbers across there. Who is the top wideout or top receiving option for Wyoming, in your opinion?
I don't have any problem saying it so far, and he didn't have a catch last week, which is still mind-boggling to me, is Chris Dirt Jr. He's a true freshman out of Chicago. He's not even on the depth chart, and I think that's more of a respect thing for the older guys that have been here because this kid is electric. He had 12 catches for 121 yards in the spring game, caught the only touchdown in Tempe, had 3 catches in that game. He came to campus at 143 pounds, was an early enrollee. They said, man, you've got a lot of talent. You've got the speed. You've got the skills. You need to show us. You need to put on at least 10 pounds. Put on well over 10 pounds. He's now at around 173 just in one off season. So really dedicated kid, really smart, ahead of his time kind of guy. I think he's really special. And then, you have some old dogs like Will Pellissier, who's from Bighorn, Wyoming, a fan favorite, of course. And then Alex Brown, who's been here for 6 years. Haven't seen enough out of those guys yet. And haven't seen, with Alex Brown, just haven't seen enough out of him over his 6 years. He's 6'5", 200 pounds, can fly. Need more out of him. And they'll be the first ones to tell you that. So, out of the wide receivers, those guys are your top targets. For the most part, there's a few other guys, but they're really missing John Michael Gyllenborg. He's a 6'5", 245-pound tight end, all-conference guy in the preseason. He's Evan Svoboda's good friend. They're roommates. All we heard about was Andrew Peasley joking last year about this connection between J. Mike and Evan and how they have some weird thing going on where he always finds J. Mike. And 84 has not been in the lineup for these first 2 games with a high ankle sprain. They're hoping to have him back for BYU. I think that's the plan. This kid has a future on Sundays. You can't downplay really how much they've missed him, but Evan's been so off target and he hasn't had a lot of time in some points in games and just has not looked comfortable. And you think if J Mike's in there, that's going to help a lot, but he's got to get better. He's got to get his reads have to be better. His footwork has to be better. He just doesn't look like he's having fun playing football and in backyard football, like say Sam Levitt from Arizona State, who was making his first start, and he looked more than comfortable. Idaho started their backup quarterback last week, Jack Wagner. He started the game 8 for 8. And that's, to me, something the Cowboys need to do. They need to get Evan some easy throws early on and then let him at it.
Flipping over the defense just for a moment, Wyatt Eckler is a name I think most BYU fans would recognize just from having watched the Cowboys. They're coming in, speaking of BYU, without their top 2 running backs as well. Both LJ Martin as well as Hinckley Ropati have both officially been ruled out. That comes from offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. What's the confidence level for Wyoming going up against let's be honest, a turnover-prone Jake Retzlaff at quarterback for BYU?
That's the key, man. Wyoming's defense hasn't even come close to getting a turnover this year, and this is the time to do it. Retzlaff's been giving it up way too much. I listened to Sitake talking this week about it. He's given the ball up way too much, and the Cowboys need to take full advantage of that. And that could start with a guy like Wyatt Eckler, who's so good in the blitz game, and he's good in coverage. He talked post-game, and, something that's been a little troubling to me, Jake, over these first 2 games is we haven't seen a ton of emotion. Okay. We haven't seen the look on guys' faces that I just lost to Idaho at home, and that's disturbing. And we didn't show up in Tempe. I'm not seeing that kind of emotion. That maybe I'm crazy. I'd be the one throwing helmets and being in the 3rd row, but he showed some emotion after this game. He hit the podium. He raised his voice. He said, "We're not even close to being what we can be." they have 9 starters returning on that side of the ball. And we saw glimpses of what they can do. And I hate to keep prefacing it this way, Jake, but it's against an FCS team at home with a backup quarterback. They went to sleep for 10 minutes in the first half of that game and let Idaho take control. And second half, held them off the scoreboard. Idaho didn't do much of anything, but Jay Sawvel will be the first to tell you they went conservative because they're an FCS team on the road and they're trying to milk that clock and get out of there with a W. And that's exactly what they did.
Now, do you expect them, because obviously BYU, their top 2 running backs, do you expect Wyoming to try and just sell out and make it so it's Jake Retzlaff's got to win this game with his arm essentially, and essentially hope that he is turnover prone?
I would. I absolutely would, especially with their backups. And I'm sure I'm sure their third string running backs just fine. I think actually he's the guy who toasted Wyoming in 2022, if I remember correctly.
It is Miles Davis who had a career high that day.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we all know BYU's offensive line probably averages 700 pounds apiece, and they're 35 years old. So you're going up against men. I mean, those men are going to move people. And BYU's always been known to have the big, nasty, big, mean, big fronts, and that'll be nothing new. So, that kid went nuts in 2022 in LaVell Edwards Stadium. I believe even their tight end went nuts that day as well. Cowboys just can't allow that to happen. And they are a little young at the cornerback spot. They've had some troubles at the cornerback spot so far, but a guy I would keep my eye on if I were you, a guy who has to have a big game, and that's defensive end Sebastian Harsh. He's a guy who's just been earmarked as their best pass rusher. He had a devastating knee injury 2 years ago, literally broke his kneecap horizontally in half and had to get that thing wired up. And we keep hearing about it, and he'll flash, but this is a game where, in my opinion, he needs to get to Retzlaff and not only get to him a couple times, but get the ball out, get the ball loose. Maybe even the Cowboys need to score a defensive touchdown in this game to spark some stuff.
All right, we'll finish up this edition of Locked On Cougars. Cody, I know you are a Wyoming guy through and through. I'm going to let people hear a little bit about your history. We're going to talk a little bit more about BYU and Wyoming's history, and we'll get to that momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you guys need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and, more importantly, for free. The best part is LinkedIn is not just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you cannot find literally anywhere else, even those who aren't actively looking for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users do not visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. The best part is on LinkedIn, over 86% of small businesses are getting a qualified candidate within 24 hours of their job posting. Hire professionals and do it like a professional on LinkedIn. The best part is 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for their hiring needs. Why aren't you? Take advantage today by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post that job for free. Of course, terms and conditions apply. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, please sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU football sent to your phone, literally in a form of a text message from myself. You can have one-on-one conversations with me as well. If you'd like to join today, we got a really strong crew as it is. You can join us. Click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching and or listening to us. It's a 14-day free trial, so join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, final stanza here with Coduy Tucket from 7220 Sports. And Cody, I heard you reference on the radio, you were on with DJ and PK, the show that I produce on a daily basis for the KSL Sports Zone, that you have seen over 300 Wyoming Cowboy football games in your life in the flesh. You've been all over the country, it sounds like, watching the Pokes. I'm not going to lie, I'm jealous of what you've been able to experience.
Well, I'm not good at math, Jake, at all. As you can see, I'm probably the first guy on your show ever that's been wearing a Slayer shirt, I'd imagine, and has a pot of flowers behind me.
Okay, here's the thing. So Connor Pay, BYU starting center, he's a weekly guest on the podcast. You and him would get along. Gojira, Slayer, he wears all those shirts when he's on my show. So
I'm impressed.
You're number 2. Let's put it that way. You're number 2. So there you go.
I'm impressed. All right. I didn't know if Slayer had made its way to Utah, just like I didn't know if internet had made its way to Wyoming yet, the way we've been losing each other here. But I've been to a lot of games, man. A lot of great ones. Ole Miss, A&M, Oklahoma State, Nebraska. I've been to Provo probably 9 times, and I've never left in a good mood. never entered in a good mood or left in a good mood. You know, even though I'm a reporter now, I still got a lot of Wyoming in me that I can't seem to shake, especially when it comes to games like this and Colorado State. And next year, your buddies up north in Salt Lake are coming to Laramie. So we haven't forgotten you.
Okay.
In case you were worried, we haven't forgotten you.
Well, I don't think BYU fans have forgotten it all either. I can put it this way. My grandfather and my dad have made many a trip to Laramie. I've been up there myself a couple of times to see games at War Memorial Stadium. It is an environment unlike many in college football. I truly think it's one of the last really good true college football environments literally in the country. So my question for you, is Barrel Man still around?
I don't think you have enough time today to go, but I actually went with Barrel Man to a Boise State game in Idaho once.
Okay.
I rode in the back seat it was me, the barrel, and my girlfriend, and we had to put our beer in the barrel. Longest trip of my life. But yes, Barrel Man is still kicking. I don't know if he's wearing the barrel anymore, but he's absolutely kung fu kicking.
Okay, I like that. Now, you said you've watched BYU and Provo a bunch of times. Obviously, you've seen them come into War Memorial Stadium. They haven't played often over the past decade plus since BYU left the Mountain West Conference, but it still feels like there is a real rivalry feel to this game coming up. Give me your sense from your perspective. Does it still exist?
For the fans, 100%. This game has been circled for a long, long time. I think a lot of us thought BYU would probably try and buy this game out and not come here. Same with Utah. The Utes were supposed to come here in 2020. Obviously, COVID wiped that out. They are still coming next year. You know, big credit to the ADs at both schools for doing that, because you certainly don't have to. And Wyoming, I think, would, always take that check and, look elsewhere. But really excited to get BYU back in Laramie. I have some really fond memories. I have some really terrible ones. I was at the WAC Championship game in 1996 in Sam Boyd Stadium, and I don't mind telling you, I was a 12-year-old kid crying like a little girl in the parking lot after that one, and the hate was real. We'll put it that way. But 1999, Wyoming absolutely hammered BYU under the lights in Laramie. That was a really good memory. And then, squeaking one out 13-10 in Joe Glenn's first year in 2003, tore down the goalpost in both of those games. But the goalpost from the 03 game, it's still above the bar, a couple of bars in downtown Laramie. Those field goal posts took a ride. So, but the more I think about it, 1988, I was so young. I don't recall that, but that's a game a lot of people point to. It was the first night game in War Memorial Stadium history. I believe the Cowboys finished with like 8 or 9 sacks that night. It was just dominant, and that's when the Cowboys won back-to-back WAC titles in those days. So it's kind of weird, Jake. You talk to different generations of fans, and some of them remember when BYU was a doormat. Others really point to the Black 14 and what a turning point that was for both programs, for the worse for Wyoming for sure. And then, you think about Lavelle Edwards and the plethora of quarterbacks. When Steve Young's your 8th quarterback on the roster, you're spoiled to death. Yeah. And no offense to Mr. Retzlaff, but this is probably the first time in my life that BYU hasn't had a dude, like a legitimate dude under center that you're like, oh boy, hopefully they can stop that guy. And I'm talking BYU fans might not even think these guys are good, but I'm talking Doman and Federick and dudes like that were maybe not even in the top 10 in anything in BYU history that were still really good quarterbacks.
Well, see, and that's the thing about that. I was going to ask about those goalposts. I wonder if they were still around. So I'm actually very pleased to hear that they're still floating around Laramie. And I still remember obviously seeing that picture of the fans just marching them down Main Street there in Laramie off into the night after that win. And this is one of those rivalries that, like I said, I've watched many of these games. I've been privileged enough to go to a bunch of them just growing up, obviously, because I went to BYU much like you grew up around Wyoming and everything. So it just feels like one of those games that's like, you know what? This is a good game to have on the schedule.
I agree. Unfortunately, it won't probably look like a lot of the old ones. The shootouts, the 96 game, which was, an instant classic, man. That it still breaks my heart to watch that, but what a classic. Yeah. And those teams just would put it up, Steve Sarkisian versus Josh Walwork. And, really the anger level after that game was unbelievable because Wyoming didn't even get a bowl game. They were 10-2. They played against what BYU was ranked 4th, I believe.
Yeah.
They go to an Alliance Bowl, and they only lost to Washington that year, which Washington was a top 10 team as well. Wyoming, BYU has to take Wyoming into overtime, and Wyoming doesn't get a bowl game, and Utah does with 4 or 5 losses. So that one sticks in the craw because the excuse we heard is, so many Wyoming fans went to that WAC title game. There's only 600,000 people in the state. Will they go to a bowl game as well? That team was so beloved. Yes, they would have gone to a bowl game, or the fans would have gone. And let's be real. I mean, that team just deserved a bowl game. Those guys ended their career. A lot of guys, Marcus Harris, Bolitnikoff winner, ended his career that night against BYU in overtime.
Crazy stuff. Well, looking forward to this, Coduy. I appreciate you carving out some time to talk with me. And like I said, I hope that BYU goes back to Laramie at some point. I know there's a lot of people who believe it might be the last time they go up there. I sincerely hope not, because I think this is one of those true rivalries that should be enjoyed by all parties.
I agree. These youngsters have no idea, but they're about to find out on Saturday.
They are, no doubt about that. Well, Coduy, thanks again for the time, man.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate you as always.
All right, that's Coduy Tucker. I'm Jake Hatch. A big thank you for joining us here on Locked On Cougars, making it your first view or listen of the day. And obviously a big thank you to all of you who we like to call everydayers as well. Until tomorrow, we do a full look at what to expect from Wyoming and BYU, and also catch up with BYU wide receiver Cody Epps. That's all tomorrow right here on Locked On Cougars.